Everybody's ready? Oh, great. Well, thank you, everyone. I just maybe make just a couple of comments with respect to last night's by-election, and then I'd open it up to any questions that you may have. First of all, I'd take this opportunity to thank all of the candidates that ran in the by-election in the Athabasca constituency last night. I'd also take the opportunity to thank all of the volunteers that worked on each of the campaigns throughout the constituency, and most importantly, thank the people of Athabasca that went out and supported their favoured candidate. I would also like to just comment on what is a historic victory for the Saskatchewan Party and congratulate our candidate, Jim LeMake, who ran for the Saskatchewan Party and was successful last night in winning that by-election. We'll be down joining our governing caucus here in the days ahead. This truly, the Saskatchewan Party has been fortunate in having the opportunity to serve as government and to represent constituencies from across the province. But now we truly, with last night's victory in Athabasca, we truly do represent constituencies from border to border to border to border in this province. I also think as you look at this by-election and the results of this by-election, it really highlights the different approaches that we're seeing with the political parties in this province and maybe even across this nation. You're seeing, political parties that are putting forward, very divisive policies, in particular over the course of the past month or two. And then you're seeing a party like the governing Saskatchewan Party in Saskatchewan that are putting forward a policy and a notion that people should come back together so that we can really achieve all of the opportunity that lies before us in this province. And most certainly that opportunity that lies before us in Saskatchewan includes northern Saskatchewan. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take those.
What do you foresee Mr. LeMake's role being in government, seeing as he now has this unique opportunity being Indigenous, but also in the north, and you mentioned the first Saskatchewan Party MLA to represent Athabasca?
Right. Well, first of all, he will be sworn in to the House when we return in the spring. Ultimately, he will join our caucus immediately. I know there's a number of caucus members that have talked to him throughout this campaign, and I know there's a number reaching out to congratulate him this morning as well. So ultimately, he'll join our caucus. He will be a strong voice for the North, as he and I've attended some of the meetings that he has had in communities across his constituency, and I can assure everyone in Athabasca that I know, and I'm sure they know, that Jim is going to be a very strong voice within the caucus, the governing caucus of the province of Saskatchewan. He'll be bringing forward the challenges and issues from his communities, like all MLAs. But ultimately, as we move forward as well, we do have to, identify that, Jim being elected, Jim LeMake being elected in his Athabasca constituency it's a historic change. This is a constituency that has never had a Saskatchewan Party candidate. So most certainly what we're seeing in this province and in that constituency is a historic change. And Jim will not only be a strong voice on behalf of his constituents, but I think he'll also be a very strong voice within the government with respect to how we continue down the path of reconciliation with our Indigenous, the Indigenous people in our province. We have come a long ways in this province on the reconciliation file, particularly when it comes to economic reconciliation with the strongest gaming agreement in Canada, strong forestry agreements with Indigenous communities, as well as over 30% of our forestry workforce is Indigenous. So we have made steps, but many more need to be taken. And I think Jim will be a very strong voice on behalf of all Saskatchewan residents when it comes to that conversation.
You put out a tweet yesterday about Caucus. Maybe just speak on that for your thoughts on the discovery there, what the provincial government is doing to support that community, but also any other sources that continue.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'd just say that our thoughts as a government most certainly are with the people of Caucus, as well as all people, Indigenous and otherwise, across this province, as we find our way through, identifying far too many unmarked graves at numerous residential schools that operated in this province. We had said at the beginning when we found when we found the original number of unmarked graves out at Maryvale School, just to the east of Regina, with Chief Cadmus DeLorme, that we will be finding more, and this won't be the end. We have partnered with the FSIN in providing $2 million to ensure that they had the resources early in this process to be going out and to, first of all, identifying where these unmarked graves are, and to start them on the path to identifying then who they are, and ultimately providing some closure for families that they've waited far too long for. This is not a proud. This history is not a proud part of Canadian history, but it is also one that we all need to participate in to truly, move forward and move forward together.
Premier, I'm just wondering, with changes in COVID policy, are you open to inviting Canadian locals back into Caucus?
Open to inviting.
Canadian locals.
Yeah. No, listen. The removal from Caucus of Ms. Wilson wasn't due to COVID policies. It was due to misrepresenting something about herself, and so there's no consideration to allowing her back into Caucus.
And I just have a question. As those legal protections for businesses or organizations requiring proof of acts for employers that was rescinded today or lifted today, I'm just wondering if you think employers or organizations have a right to ask their employees for vaccination status?
In private sector employees, they can do what they like, but as I said, they need to, do their own consultations on whether they should be doing that, and they may, risk some potential action if they are going to, with whatever they do. So that's a decision that private business owners will have to make. What we have done and what we encourage all to do, including private business owners and those owners of public places, is to truly get back to where we were pre-pandemic with respect to open and free access to all of our public facilities, as well as our private facilities as well. We would ask people to, really have a look at, yes, these policies have been effective. As we move forward, what we really want is for people to have unencumbered access, like we did 25 months ago. And so that is the government's goal. That's why we have lifted the proof of vaccination policy, as it has run its course. Our vaccination numbers have increased, and we are facing a different variant in the Omicron variant relative to the Delta variant when that policy was introduced. On this note, I would say that, vaccine policy, vaccine mandates are at the very core of what we see happening across this country in various protests, and what we see happening in downtown Ottawa. And we've seen all provinces now announce a plan of at least reducing the public health measures that they have in place. A number of provinces have announced a plan to eliminate all public health measures, including Saskatchewan, by a certain time. And we would encourage the federal government, excuse me, we would encourage the federal government to also put forward a plan. We feel that would go a long way in de-escalating, a number of protests across this nation. And in particular, we feel putting forward a plan like that would go a long ways to de-escalating the situation in downtown Ottawa as well. People do want to find their way back to normal, maybe not today or tomorrow, but in the weeks and months ahead. And I think that would be we would urge the federal government to once again reconsider where their vaccine mandates are today, and at least communicate with Canadians when they are going to be removed. They can't be there forever. They will need to be removed at some point in time, and it would be our advice to the federal government to communicate that sooner rather than later.
Is it your, are you thinking of publishing health data daily? We've back to that. Saskatchewan's the only province that's moved to weekly. There's been some criticism from the health community. People that say they don't know what's happening in hospitals, they don't know what's happening in communities, they don't get that update. Maybe not a news release, but just bring the dashboard back on a daily basis, at least for the short term. Any thoughts on bringing that back?
No. The short answer is no. We've shifted to a weekly data communication system. I'm sure there's some data that is being communicated within the Saskatchewan Health Authority that's relevant to, what they would have done even pre-pandemic. As we find our way through this, we're aware that there are staffing challenges with the Omicron variant being there. We're aware there are staffing shortages, due to employees, like any business, that are being required to self-isolate. We are also aware that in certain areas, certain facilities, at times, there are pressures, very real pressures with respect to how busy our healthcare system is. Where we are today, across the healthcare system, and we have said this since the beginning, we intend to use our entire provincial capacity. We're about 86% in our non-ICU capacity is being utilized today. That's down from about 91% last week. So we understand there's some localized challenges, in particular in our tertiary centres. Those are very busy. They're very busy previous to COVID, and as we look ahead to, finding our way through a surgical backlog like many other provinces, they're going to be very busy in those facilities for years to come. That's why we are investing in additional ICU beds. That's why we are investing in reducing that surgical wait time, and that's why, quite frankly, and you will see in the weeks and months ahead, we need to continue to invest in our healthcare system and in the people that are working in our healthcare system. And so you have seen some of that investment be announced throughout COVID. You've seen that investment be provided throughout COVID, and you're going to continue to see that investment in the months ahead as we head into a spring budget. Again, I would encourage the federal government to have a fulsome conversation with the provinces on their share, the federal funding that goes into healthcare, which has slipped down to about 20–22% across the nation, should be up around 35%. The ask is before the federal government from all 13 premiers, 10 provinces, 3 territories, to increase the Canada Health Transfer, and we would most certainly ask the federal government to consider that as well.
You put in a statement the other day about the Emergency Act. Wondering what your thoughts are today, a couple days after the federal government announced that. Whether it's necessary, whether it's an overstep, what do you think?
Yeah, certainly not necessary. Certainly is an overstep. When you look at the bridge in Windsor being cleared by very capable Ontario Police Force as well as the Windsor Municipal Police Force, and I suspect probably some RCMP involvement. The Emergency Act was not necessary for that. Any of the fines or arrests that were actually made were made under the charge of mischief, which is under the criminal code. When you look at the capable work that has been done on multiple border crossings by the RCMP with local law enforcement, we most certainly can see, and premiers have said, that the Emergency Act is not necessary to disperse those crowds that may be acting in an illegal way. The tools are already there. The police need to utilize those tools. And I would just take this opportunity to give a thank you to our law enforcement at all levels in this province, the RCMP, our municipal police force, most notably the RPS, the Regina Police Force, as well as our provincial law enforcement agencies, our highway traffic control, our officers, our conservation officers that are helping in the efforts to, one, communicate with a number of protests that are occurring here in this province, to communicate with them what the laws actually are. And what we're seeing for the most part, and by and large in Saskatchewan, is very peaceful protests where individuals are following the law, they're not shutting down borders, and they are having their voice heard. Yeah, the Provincial Emergency Act is in effect for one reason and one reason only, and that is so that we can direct our healthcare staff throughout the provincial system. Previous to having the one healthcare authority, at some point, the Saskatchewan Health Authority had lost that ability to direct staff to where they're needed within the system, and so it is in place simply for that reason. And when you read the reasoning behind the enaction of the Provincial Act, that's precisely why it's there. It's not there for any other enforcement reasons. None of that is in the Emergency Act. Yeah. Pardon me? As soon as we are able, as soon as our healthcare system is able to function without having to be able to, pull, for example, some nurses out of one facility and to move them into another area of care, as soon as we're able to function without having to do that, we would lift the Emergency Act immediately.
Why do you need an act for that? Can't the employer just tell me
No, which is surprising, which is something I think we need to have a look at. That for some reason, a previous government has essentially bargained that clause away, and that's the only reason we have the Emergency Act in place, is so that the employer can actually tell our employee where we need them to work within our system. For example, our vaccination effort. We had to ask and move people around within the healthcare system. That's why the Emergency Act was in place, so that we were able to actually have our very robust vaccination program that we had. Our PCR testing program was very similar. Yeah, I'm not aware of any request for additional resources. In particular in Alberta, I've heard earlier that there may be a request in Ontario or Ottawa more specifically. I'm not aware if the RCMP would have received a request on that. To my knowledge, there has not been an official request. And I think the resources are there, the tools are there with respect to the laws that we have. When people are protesting, they have a right to a peaceful protest. But when the laws are being broken, ultimately, I think all Canadians would expect that those laws will be enforced by the law enforcement agencies. And again, a credit to our local law enforcement here in this province, who have communicated far in advance of these people coming together to have their voice heard, to ensure that they know precisely what the laws are, what they aren't, and they've followed them. Yeah, sorry, Adam.
Do you think it's time for the protesters to leave Ottawa? You're speaking of breaking the law for people that are parked there illegally, that are impeding people's workplaces, their homes,
Yeah.
their closed down. Have they made their point?
Yeah, I think there are. I'm not aware precisely, but I presume there are a number of laws that are being broken in Ottawa, and they shouldn't be. And they should be enforced by the police there. There is a role, however, as I say, for the federal government to help in de-escalating this situation. Public health measures, in particular the federal vaccine mandate with no negative test option, they should provide some guidance on when that vaccine mandate is going to go by the wayside. That would go a long ways in de-escalating not only the situation in Ottawa, but the conversations that we're hearing in communities across this nation and across this province. I think it's incumbent on the federal government to do what they can to de-escalate the situation, and I think that's should be the first priority. The Emergency Act does not provide any tools that are necessary, and that's been proven in Windsor and Caucus and other border crossings. Emerson, I believe, is dispersing this morning. It's been proven that the Emergency Act is not necessary. Most certainly, that is not, and this is what I told the Prime Minister earlier this week. The Emergency Act does nothing to de-escalate this situation. It does nothing to bring Canadians back together, and most certainly it's not necessary, so why would you bring it in? And in particular, why would you bring it in Saskatchewan?
When can we expect the provincial budget to come, and how much more health dollars are you willing to commit?
Well, I'm not sure the date. It'll be in the parliamentary calendar. Yeah, so it'll be middle to latter half of March, and we'll announce the additional healthcare funding in the budget. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to give that to you today.
But you mentioned it's going to be more general.
Absolutely. It's more each and every year. The history of this government is one that does invest in healthcare, not just in healthcare capital, but invests in additional surgical capacity, invests most certainly in the care that's being provided, not only in our tertiary centres, but in our communities right across Saskatchewan. And that's going to continue in this budget. And we would ask again, alongside every other premier in this nation, that the federal government become a full funding partner of the healthcare that's being delivered provincially and in the territories. It's been highlighted, some of the challenges that, quite frankly, provinces have been covering over the course of COVID, but those challenges have been there for some period of time, and it is time for the federal government to be a full funding partner, increase their level of funding through the Canada Health Transfer, and increase it to full 35%, which would go a long ways in ensuring that we would have not only a healthy and robust health system across Canada. We're concerned with Saskatchewan, but would also ensure that provinces' balance sheets would be strong as well, because right now they're covering about 15% of the federal share of healthcare funding.
What would happen to our healthcare system, say the federal government doesn't commit to more dollars? How would that affect?
We have to continue to provide health care to the people of the province, and so we have to continue to invest. and we will continue to invest. We're going to continue to invest in reducing the surgical wait time that we have in Saskatchewan, not unlike provinces across the nation. We're going to continue to invest in mental health and addictions. And one of our travels into the northern community of Pine House with Minister Hindley, we were able to talk to the community, a number of community members that had gathered for what they call a ROC meeting, or Recover Our Community meeting, which they have every Monday morning, and talk about the importance of a provincial investment in the Musquewa Lake Wellness Camp in that community. That is, specifically supporting people that need, mental health and potentially addictions support in that community. And that is precisely the kind of work that we need to do and continue to do in communities right across Saskatchewan.
How much do you think your handling of the pandemic reflected in the results in Athabasca? In particular, your decision more recently to start to move away from restrictions versus the NDP who basically keep things in place?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I would say Jim LeMaig is a tremendous individual, retired RCMP officer, a person of great character, and just I think going to be an excellent representative for not only the Athabasca constituency, but an excellent representative from a provincial perspective at the caucus table in the governing caucus. So thank you to the Athabasca voters for sending this government a person of the quality of Jim LeMaig. For that, we are grateful. Government policies will play a role. Government investments in communities, in constituencies across this province will play a role. And this has been a government that does invest in the North, has invested in the North. We have Ducharme School is being replaced in the community of Laloche. I mentioned the Musquewa Lake Wellness Camp. We have over $60 million that's being invested in northern highways and airports just this last budget year, and we'll see more investment again in this upcoming budget. So most certainly, all of those policies have a role to play, I'm sure, not only in last night's by-election, but likely even in previous elections. So and other elections across the province. With respect to COVID policy, I've said many times, our MLAs are talking to people from across this province, and what they are hearing is people do want to get back to normal. They do want to ensure that we're preserving that healthcare capacity that we have, but they do want to find their way back to normal, and they want to see what that looks like. And that's why I urge the federal government to participate in that process like every province has so far. We also see more recently a variance in policies between the two parties in Saskatchewan, and we see this across the nation as well, where you see a policy, one party that is using very divisive language, and I would say quite hateful language actually, where people are going to have their voice heard legally and peacefully, like they did at Redgeway last weekend, where we have a party that calls on the government to condemn them and calls them extremists. That is divisive, hateful language that is not necessary as we move forward, and we move forward trying to bring this province back together. You have a governing party with a very different view and a very different message to the people of this province that we do need to come back together. We can disagree and not be disagreeable. We have so much opportunity that lies before us in this province as we look out over the course of the next number of months, the next number of years, and out to 2030, and we want to achieve it all, and it includes everyone in this Saskatchewan, in this province, and it most certainly includes the North. So does the government policies have an impact on last night's election results? I believe they do. And this government brings a message of unity and coming back together so that we can be all we can be as individuals, as communities, and as a province.
Is there an expectation that STI, if you know about this, will follow the Emergency Act and the removal of driver's license and registrations? Is that one of the provisions that they're on? Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, we're actively looking into it. So the removal of commercial insurance or insurance, physical insurance on a vehicle, if there's Saskatchewan vehicles either in Ottawa or wherever they are, is quite problematic. How do you get that vehicle back to its place of origin? And so SGI is actively looking into what they can do should that act be enforced on some Saskatchewan licensed vehicles, how we can ensure that there still potentially could still be some physical damage insurance on those vehicles. So we're looking into what this all means right now. As I said, we don't feel the Federal Emergency Act should have been enacted. We don't think in any way that this provides an opportunity to bring people back together. We think it's a divisive move by the federal government, and we think they have another path that would be much more effective. And that path is to put forward a plan on what the de-escalation of their federal vaccine mandates would look like in the weeks and months ahead.
Do you think if they announced that plan, the protest would end?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that, but it most certainly is what I think, in fairness, and now that we've seen every province announce their plan, it's what Canadians, not just the ones that are in Ottawa in the protests, but what Canadians are ultimately looking for. And I think it would go a long ways to bringing this country back together. That's our goal in this province, and we would ask that the federal government quit labeling, like we see the opposition here in Saskatchewan, protesters that are participating, and make a concerted effort to, essentially represent the people across this nation that they were elected to do so. Yeah.
National Chief of AFN and Caucus they said that these unmarked graves that were found that I was speaking about yesterday
Sorry, should which?
should be considered as a crime.
Oh, who said that?
It was Caucus and the National Chief of AFN.
Cadmus Delorme said that?
Yeah. So do you think the RCMP should be investigating these findings as a crime?
I think, and that's the 50 or so that were found. So I didn't hear that. I'm not aware as to why Chief Delorme would be saying something such as that. But most certainly, I think we have worked in partnership and done what we can with the FSIN first, and providing some funding, so as I said earlier, that we can actually identify where these graves are, ultimately identify who they are, and provide some closure to the family. As you go through that process, if there are indications that there's some criminal activity of any kind, I would hope that the RCMP will certainly look at that. I'm not aware of the precipitus as to why those comments were made. Jeremy's trying to get me to announce the budget a month early, eh? Hey? Trying to get me to announce the budget early. That's usually a